Hi, thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to present some of our resource group members from our African American resource group who are going to be sharing some stories about who they are and what their life experiences have been. So thank you all for being here. And I am going to kick it off with Beverly Taylor, who is a regional HR director for our Chicago and DC offices. Thanks for being here, Bev.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with, Bev, tell us where you're from.
Well, I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts in the 70s, and came here 35 years ago when I came down for Howard, to attend Howard.
That's great. So how long have you been with Nixon Peabody now?
2.5 years.
That's okay. So you're relatively new.
Yeah. Exactly, especially for Nixon.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little about what's your family like?
Well, I came from a female-driven world, very strong women in my family. My mother was a community activist. I'm one of 5 kids. We were very politically active in my childhood, and it continued when I went to Howard, but we're very close-knit, and we love making a difference in the community. So that's been a nice little bond between me and my siblings and my mother before she passed.
That's wonderful. So tell me one thing that you are really great at, or a hobby, and tell us how you got into it.
Well, I recently became a silversmith, which is a very strange hobby, I know. But I've always really loved working with my hands and wanted to learn how to forge metal, and started taking classes and working with experts. And most recently, just before we all had to quarantine at home, I was very close to receiving that official designation that I'm an official silversmith. So I'm not quite there yet.
That's wonderful. So why don't you share with us, what would you consider your greatest achievement to date?
Oh, wow. Well, I have raised my 2 children, but prior to that, I raised or participated in raising 4 of my siblings' children. So I have been a person who has been very involved in trying to uplift young people. That's something I'm particularly proud of. And many of them have gone on to get advanced degrees and have done wonderful things with their life.
That's amazing. So would you share with us one story that helped you make you the amazing person that you are today?
There is a story from my childhood that really, I think, shaped me. And first, I'd have to say that it was really my mother's story, and I got to be at her side as she went through it. But my family, the Crockett's, that's my middle name, we were one of several litigants that sued the Boston public school system and desegregated schools there. That was a very tumultuous time in Boston's history. And my mother, who was a warrior, who led that charge, the famous case, Morgan v. Hennigan, was the spokesperson for the group. And we had a tough time in Boston in the 70s going through that. And it deeply affected our family, but I learned a lot about courage and perseverance and sticking to your values and standing up. So that was really powerful for me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Bev. So Teray, I'm going to come to you now. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where are you from?
Yes, so I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, born and raised. Unfortunately, I haven't lived there since I graduated from high school when I went on to Cornell, but my entire family is actually still in New Jersey, and I get back a few times a year.
As a fellow Jersey person, I applaud that.
Good.
So tell me, how long have you been with the firm?
So I started, well, as an associate, I joined the firm in 2011, so almost 9 years, but I actually was a summer associate in 2009. So it actually feels like quite a long tenure, but it's been a great ride here in the commercial litigation group.
So you are homegrown, so to speak.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
So tell us a little bit about what your family's like.
Yeah, so I actually come from a, similar to Bev, I come from a large and very close-knit family. I'm actually the oldest of six, so I have, my siblings would probably call the domineering oldest child mentality sometimes, but I'm working on that. But my family's very close. Everyone is still in New Jersey. As an example of that, during my law school graduation, I actually probably had about 20 members of both my father and mother side of the family present. And when I went on stage, they cheered so loud that the graduation speaker pulled me aside as I was grabbing my diploma and said, "You have a whole squad there supporting you," which was pretty exciting. So
That's awesome. So tell me about one thing that you would say you were really great at, or a hobby that you have, and how you got into it.
well, I'm great at a lot of things, very good. No, but
So tell us about them.
one of my biggest hobbies over that I've been doing for the last 5 years is actually CrossFit. Several people I'm close with in the firm is aware of my involvement with CrossFit. I've been doing it since 2015. I actually got involved in CrossFit at the recommendation of a colleague, Morgan Nyan, who was very into it, and I was looking for some group fitness and something in a community that was supportive, and I've loved it. It's both obviously good from a fitness perspective, but it's also a good stress reliever. I find that when I walk into my CrossFit gym, that like the all of the just the inherent stress and pressure of being a lawyer, it's like a switch. It goes off. And I just don't even think about work at all during the entire hour. And probably it's because I'm under duress, dealing with the weightlifting and all the cardio workouts. But I do find doing CrossFit to be incredibly liberating. A more recent hobby of mine has been trying to become like an amateur photographer, but I bought a camera last year, and whenever I would travel both domestically and internationally, I started taking photos and posting them on my Instagram. I'll plug my hashtag Howell ESQ photography. So if you go on Instagram, you'll see some of the photos that I've taken in my travels over the last year.
That's so cool. I am going to start following you.
Hey.
So tell us about what is your greatest achievement to date?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, thinking of that question, for me, it was when something that was transformational for me, in both professionally and from a personal perspective. About 5 years ago, maybe six, when I was a four and a half, maybe fifth year associate, I was given the opportunity to do my first oral argument before the Massachusetts Appeals Court. So first appellate argument, where you're going to have a panel of judges. I kind of sort of dropped into the position where I was filling in for a colleague who had moved on. So I had to learn the case several weeks before the oral argument and prepare to represent a bank, a financial institution at the Massachusetts Appeals Court. And reason why that was transformational for me, because it was an emotional experience. Although I never shared this with the partner I was working on the case, but I remember going into the courtroom and the panel of judges come out and they do the opening ritual when they say, "Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay," and the judges all stand and they're standing next to the American flag. I got emotional internally at the time, and it was because at that time I had started doing Ancestry.com research about my own family heritage, and I was trying to track my family heritage back to at least to an ancestor who might have been who had been enslaved. I know that I come from enslaved peoples in South Carolina, but I didn't have names or details for some of my ancestors, and I started to discover that information through Ancestry, actually, within the months leading up to that oral argument. So when I did that oral argument, and when the judges came out and they were there was that pomp and circumstance moment, it felt like a major milestone, not just for me professionally, but a major milestone for my entire lineage and my entire family. So that was very, I don't know if I would consider it my greatest achievement, but it was a transformational experience for me.
That's amazing. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go to Dana. Dana, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Sure. So I was actually born in Oakland, California, but I come from a military family. So when I was very young, we relocated to Prince George's County, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. And that's where I grew up, and my family, they're still there.
That's great. So how long have you been with Nixon Peabody?
So I've been at the firm for about 6.5 years. I joined as a relatively junior associate. Prior to joining Nixon, I spent about 2.5 years working in federal government for the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
And I should have started with both introducing Teray and Dana by saying which groups you're in. As Teray mentioned, he's an associate in complex commercial disputes. And Dana, you are our partner in our affordable housing and real estate group, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. So Dana, tell us a little bit about what your family's like.
So I grew up in, I guess, a relatively smaller family compared to those who've spoken thus far. So it's my mother, my father, and one sibling, an older sister, who actually went to law school as well. We were actually in law school at the same time, though different schools.
That's pretty cool. So what has been your greatest achievement to date? What would you say was it?
So I struggled a little bit with this question. I guess I'll divide it into two parts. So for my greatest professional achievement, maybe just because it's still relatively new, but actually just, becoming a partner at Nixon this year, it's something I consider, a great achievement. I didn't necessarily expect this when I started my law school career and didn't necessarily expect it to happen this early. I hope that I have even greater achievements professionally from here on out and fully expect to do so. For my greatest personal achievement, I would say it's still sort of in the works. I mentioned to some people, but I'm expecting my first child, and that's something I'm very excited and happy about, and I fully expect parenthood to be the greatest achievement.
That's so wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to know is if you want to share with us one story that helped you make you the person you are today.
Sure. So mine isn't so much a story as an experience. And so I actually didn't know until today that Bev attended Howard University. I also attended Howard University for undergraduate, and I would say that's a pretty impactful experience in my development. For those people who don't know, Howard is a historically Black university in Washington, D.C. Some might even say the preeminent historically Black university. I'm sure I'll ruffle a few feathers by saying that, but I'm going to go with it. So, you might think that attending a university where you have a predominantly Black student population, it wouldn't be particularly diverse, but that's actually, not the case. Although, most of the students share this common bond of race, whatever that means. All of us came from a wide variety of different backgrounds, experiences, cultures, different countries. And I think, Howard, provided a safe space to grow and develop in a world that doesn't always provide that safe space. And it, instills in its students a sense of pride and, social and civic responsibility, which is definitely the case for me.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So John, I'm going to come to you. John Marti is a partner in our Community Development and Finance Department. And so John, tell us about where you're from.
Sure, thanks Rika, and thank you for putting this together. So I was actually born in the Dominican Republic, and I moved here with my family when I was 3 years old. So I was a little baby, and when we came over from the Dominican, we lived in a few places in New York and Connecticut, but eventually settled in Rhode Island. And that's where I would say I grew up and spent most of my formative years through high school. And, haven't lived in Rhode Island since I graduated high school, and I've been in Massachusetts ever since.
Great. So how long have you been with Nixon Peabody?
Like Teray, I'm homegrown. I was a summer associate back in the summer of 2010, which seems like ages ago, and I've been with the Community Development Finance Group since I started as an associate in 2011. Yeah, 2011.
Great. So tell us a little bit about what your family's like.
Sure. So like I said, I'm from the Dominican Republic, so we truly had like the immigrant experience. And my parents are, very, very old school, so to speak, and it was my parents. I'm the youngest of three, so I'm the baby of the family. So it's still to this day, my parents always laugh when they see me cooking or doing anything that that they're always surprised, like, "Hey, John, you're doing that? Are you sure you can handle that?" So it's pretty funny. But I'm the youngest of three children. You know, we're a very close knit family. Just kind of a really tight core there. And then in kind of the extended family in the Dominican, we still have several aunts and uncles and cousins. My parents both come from large families. My dad is one of 7 and my mother is one of 6. So we have a large extended family. And growing up, when I'll get to this later, we would, you know, spend summers down there, and it was just a really cool experience.
That sounds so nice. So tell me one thing that you were really great at, or a hobby that you have, and how you got into it.
Sure. So I am actually a new-ish father. I have 13-month-old twin boys who are sleeping right now. So if you hear them wake up, that might have to go on mute or something. But I'm actually really good at changing diapers. Before the boys were born, I could honestly say I'd never changed a diaper before in my life. And now I could probably do it, you know, one-handed with my eyes closed. So that's not the hobby. I mean, I think since this quarantine thing had started, actually out of the Peloton bike, you kind of see it behind me here. I try to get on that as much as I can. That's been a lot of fun to just kind of clip in and ride a bike that goes nowhere. It's a good workout, and I know there's several Nixon folks who partake, so it's great.
That sounds fun. And congratulations on the kids. I've seen a few of them on the Zooms from time to time. Very cute.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us what you consider to be your greatest achievement to date?
Well, the greatest achievement, I would have to say it's, you know, becoming a husband and a father. You know, it sounds cliche, but, you know, just being a young father just changed my life. It changed my whole perspective on everything, really. It really made me appreciate and, you know, really, you know, look at my parents differently and the sacrifices that they made for myself and my siblings. And, you know, I can just, you know, I always appreciated it, but it really wasn't until, you know, Sam and James and, you know, holding them and thinking about them that I can see why, you know, they were willing to kind of uproot their entire lives and move to a country without knowing the language, or, you know, really not having any connections, just to give their children better lives, which I just admire. I always admired, but, you know, having 2 little ones really cemented that for me.
That's awesome. So do you want to share with us one story that helped you make you the person you are today? And it could be fatherhood or anything else.
Sure. Well, growing up, I was always into baseball. So I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Obviously, that did not work out. But I think it was in the summers in the Dominican Republic, we would go and I'd have my, you know, fancy glove and baseball equipment and all that stuff. And then we would just play with the neighborhood kids and just, you know, get smoked, and I'd get strike out, just wouldn't be able to hit anything. And it made me realize that, you know, maybe baseball isn't in the cards for me. So so that was certainly not the thing that shaped me who I am today. You know, not a professional ball player, but it was definitely pretty eye-opening to see that, you know, it was a cool experience to see that people can do more with less, because they did not have the fancy gloves and bats and stuff like that I had brought down and actually left with them, but they were still way better than me, or way better than I ever could dream to be. So it, you know, makes you appreciate kind of what you have, and you know.
Are you still into baseball?
I am. Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, there's no baseball in this COVID environment, but I am a big Red Sox fan.
I had a feeling. Well, thank you so much, John. Steve, I'm going to come to you. So, Steve, tell us where you're from.
I am from the great city, Jersey City, New Jersey. So another New Jersey person, born and raised. Yeah, so I go back pretty often. It's very much home.
Yep. And so Steve is an associate in our global finance practice group, and he's in our Boston office as well. So Steve, tell us how long you've been with Nixon Peabody.
So like Teray and John, I'm homegrown. So I summered with Nixon in 2011, and then I started in 2012. So it's been about 8 years, full-time practice.
And so tell us a little bit about what your family's like.
Sure. So my family's not as big as some of the others, but definitely very matriarchal and woman-driven. So my immediate family is me and my mom, and then my mom has 3 sisters. My grandmother runs the ship. So I've got my grandparents, my mom's 3 sisters, 5 cousins that were pretty much like my siblings growing up, and we're all they're all in New Jersey. So it's that's the core, and then I've got some family in the South, in South Carolina and Georgia, but most of us are in Jersey.
Great. So share with us something that you're really great at, or a hobby that you have, and how you got into it.
Okay. So I actually write quite a bit. So in probably the past few years, have written a couple of manuscripts, and I write primarily young adult fantasy and science fiction, which is completely separate from this entire career. And it's funny because growing up, I was more of a math and science kid, and I'll never forget my English teacher when I was a freshman at my high school. She said, you know, your writing is just not up to par. And it was a lot of tough love. And it was after that I just was like, I refused to believe that like I can't be a good writer. So I just like devoured like everything from Russian literature to like beatnik stuff. I was all over the place. And it's funny how that one little comment or that one experience changed the entire way that I looked at what I wanted to do with my career and my life. And if not for that, I probably wouldn't have been a lawyer either. So it feeds into both. But yeah, so I do quite a bit of writing. The publishing process is exhausting, so I have taken a break from actually like finishing all of my edits on a manuscript that I wrote. But yeah, no, it's I think storytelling is important no matter what medium you're using.
Absolutely, and I look forward to reading one of these books one day. So why don't you tell us what you consider to be your greatest achievement to date?
So my greatest achievement, I am not a parent like some of the other people, but I did recently, last year, I was able to buy my mom a house, which for me was a goal that I'd had since I was a kid. So I grew up pretty poor. And a lot of my friends, my favorite Disney movie is Beauty and the Beast. And Belle at the beginning is saying, there must be more than this provincial life. And that's pretty much exactly how I felt growing up, that, a bunch of my friends growing up, it was like, we wanted more and there just had to be more than this, right? And so that idea, just getting my mom, out of the apartment that I grew up in into a house that we could claim as our own and whatnot was incredibly important to me. And so just being able to stick with it from high school to college to law school to now was a massive achievement. It is also bittersweet because I think of like my friends who wanted the same thing, and it's like, well, there's so many other there's so much like luck and privilege and so much opportunity that allowed me to do that. But I'm proud and very happy that was what happened.
That's truly amazing, Steve. Really, that's amazing. So do you want to share with us one story that helped you make you the person that you are today?
Sure. So when I was in high school, my school had an exchange program with this Japanese school in Okayama, Japan. And the way that it would work is that you would have students host Japanese students in the fall, and then Americans would go in the spring. And so at that point, I think I was a sophomore in high school, my exposure to Japan was Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. Like, I knew nothing about Japan, but I met these kids and I was just like, they're so cool. And I, at that point, just was determined. I said, I'm gonna learn Japanese. I just went fully in. And so everything from Japanese TV to comic books, I just was completely, enmeshed in it. And I was also determined to go to Japan on the program. Now, the problem is that, so I went to this very affluent high school on a scholarship. So I was not, my living situation was not similar to my classmates. And so hosting students didn't really work. And so participating was a problem. And even just, I talked to my mom about it and she's like, we don't have the money for it, but if you can make it work, then you have my blessing, go for it. And so I hustled. I I was able to find someone on staff who had a foundation that she'd set up for her son that had passed. And it actually wound up sponsoring me to go to Japan. And that experience changed the entire course of my entire academic career. So everything that I did was Japanese and Chinese focused. I was pretty sure I was going to live in Tokyo. Everything was really just East Asian focused. And even now that I'm in Boston, that perspective and that experience is still so powerful for me, and just is just so much of my life experience.
That's an amazing story, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Jade, I'm gonna come over to you now. So Jade is an associate in our public finance practice group, and she's in our Los Angeles office. Jade, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Okay, so I am from Sacramento, California, so Northern California. I'm the youngest of four. My parents are from Sacramento area too. I actually, my parents divorced when I was younger, and so my dad is, my biological father's a pastor, and then my bonus dad, who was just like a dad, is a lawyer. So you have a pastor and you have a lawyer. The Turner is actually the pastor, the Bond is the lawyer, and my mom it's fantastic, and she's an engineer. So
that's wonderful. So how long have you been with Nixon Peabody?
So I've been with Nixon since late 2014. So 6 years, almost 6 years. Yeah.
So I know you just shared a little about your parents. Do you want to share anything more about your family and what they're like?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people said to me, my mom is a very strong mother. She definitely kind of leads the house, which is what I hope to aspire to be as well. I have a young son that's about 15 months old, Elijah, and he's wonderful.
I know, I've seen Elijah on camera, the cutest little kid. So tell me one thing that, about something you're really great at, or a hobby that you have, and how you got into it.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I actually talked to my sister, Jazz, about this, and we were like, oh, we really enjoy working, working. Like, no, we just don't have, I feel like I don't have space for a lot of hobbies. But when I think of who aspirationally, right, that I would be, I think I really like growing up. I loved miniatures. And so I have a miniature dollhouse. And I think if I had more time, I would do that. But in my free time now, my mom's become quite a good cook, and she got me into kind of baking recipes from cookbooks. And she just got me this Miette cookbook, which is this bakery that's in San Francisco in the Ferry Building. And so I've been actually baking more, which has been, I think that's a hobby. Yeah.
I think so. I've been considering cooking and eating a hobby throughout the entire pandemic. So.
That's right.
So do you want to tell us what has been your greatest achievement to date?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think mainly right now I can say it's my son. I went through the IVF process to get him here, so it really was like a major, 2-year long process, and so that's a huge achievement. I'm so happy that I didn't stop, and I just continued with it because he's here, and I thought that's a great achievement. I honestly also just feel like getting through college and law school and passing the bar, which was tough, getting into the private sector, becoming an attorney at Nixon, going through the ranks is a great achievement as well. And just, I think on a personal level, besides Elijah, just being able to take care of my family is my biggest achievement.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Jade. So Emery, now it's coming to you. So Emery Lewis is a conflict analyst in our Rochester office. And Emery, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
So I was born in Houston, Texas, and we moved to Rochester. I think I was about 5 months old. My family's originally from Rochester, so it was kind of easy to just come back. So yeah, Rochester's been home. I've been here for pretty much 32 years.
Wow. So how long have you been with Nixon Peabody? Because I know you have a long history.
Yeah. So working, I've been working at Nixon for 4 years now, 4 years this past January. But I started out doing mock trial. I think I was, I want to say 14 or 15. That was back in the early 2000s. And so Nixon kind of been home for me for quite some time. And it's just nice to be, finally, working here now and taking my career in this direction. So.
Absolutely. You're part of the family.
Yeah, right.
So tell us a little bit more about what your family's like.
Very small, not, listening to everybody's stories here. My family it consists of myself, my mom, my sister, who's older, my grandmother, and my aunt who has special needs. My grandfather passed in 2009, so he's no longer with us. But my sister now has two beautiful children who I am absolutely just in love with. My nephew Jabari, who's a year and a half, and then my niece Giada, who's 4 months old. So we're growing, the family's growing, but yeah, and I was lucky enough to grow up across the street from my grandparents. So it was just a really nice experience having them, as our anchor.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So why don't you share with us something that you're really great at or a hobby that you have and how you got into it?
So there are two things, and I use the word great lightly. I am a very good golfer. And I got started because my mom said when I was young, around I think 2 or 3, she used to sit me in front of the television and put golf on, and that was like the only thing that really calmed me down. And so she noticed that and somehow bought me this little junior set from like a consignment shop. And then as I got older, I think around 12 years old, she started to, we found a program for kids in the inner city to give them golf lessons, and that's kind of when things just took off. The other thing is cooking. I used to be attached to my grandmother's hip. My grandmother is our matriarch, and she is a wonderful cook. She's from Mississippi. So she's taught me everything I know. But when I was little, I used to follow her around the kitchen. She used to give me little tasks, and it kind of just started to evolve. She said she saw something and just was like, he just has a knack for it. So those two things are like my number one passions outside of, anything else. I really enjoy doing them both. So.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So why don't you share with us what you consider to be your greatest achievement to date?
I can't point to one thing specifically. I think, I know for myself what it is that I've been able to take the opportunities I've been given and help other people. That's what's most important to me, I guess, at the end of the day. We all, I think, hold ourselves to high standards in accomplishing our goals, and we've all worked to do such. And I think what's most important is to always look back and give back and never forget where we come from. So, it's just being able to take these opportunities to really help other people and help hopefully change their lives in some way. That's, I think, the greatest achievement to date.
Couldn't agree more. That's amazing. So would you share with us one story that helped you make you the person that you are today?
I think it's a twofold thing. First, it's growing up without a dad, and I think that is, you carry with that with you as you get older, and something that it just leaves a little bit of a void. But as you go on, you realize how much that void is filled by people that really care about you, whether including your family and those outside of your family. That's been a big motivating factor in my life. And it's kind of, as I've gotten older, I've understood what it's meant and appreciated it for what it is. And I know that who I want to be as a father, as a professional, as a husband going forward. And I think that will kind of bring everything full circle for me and kind of fill that void in a way that I haven't experienced yet. And I think the other experience was like Steve, I had the opportunity to study abroad when I was in college. I went to a very affluent high school, all boys, Jesuit, financial aid, and I took Italian. And they were the kids that my fellow students who could afford the trip to Italy each year could go, and I could never go because I couldn't afford it. So I promised myself that if I ever got the opportunity, mainly in college, to go to Italy, I was going to do it. So I worked my tail off. In my junior year of college, I spent 8 months in Rome. I lived in Rome and traveled all over Western Europe, and that absolutely changed my life. The most incredible experience that I've had to date, and I am so grateful for it. So
That is amazing. That sounds like a truly wonderful experience.
it's great. So
Well, thank you all so much for sharing those wonderful stories with all of us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to learning more about the cool stuff you do as I continue to eat my way through the pandemic.
yeah.
So, all right. Thank you all.